clock on the wall shows it's after 11. The moon is riding high in the sky, and that can mean only one thing. It's time for your new favorite show on the state of the world. That's right, folks, this is Countdown to Armageddon, and I am your host, Publius. Once again, out here to bring you a little bit of truth out of the darkness, a little light to shine to help you see what's really going on around you. And we are 1 week into the reign of President I can write anything I want, Biden. The man who is out to oppose the mighty dictatorship of the Donald Trump himself has come out and wrote more executive orders in the shortest amount of time than any other president in history. And let's look at some of these laws, these executive orders that the great Biden has come up with. Yes, folks, our fearless leader was worried about the safety of the world so much that he went ahead and said, no more deportations. Put a 100-day moratorium on these deportations, stopping the deportation of everybody in. So everybody that had already been arrested is slated to be deported. Now, this included violent criminals. Now, I read recently somewhere, and I'm checking on it to find out if it's true. I'm not positive, but I've heard he's actually released these people back into the streets and into society until such point as they're corrected. Now, another thing that he's done here, well, he's being sued. Right now, this plan has been officially told to stop by the courts because he violated an agreement. By stopping all deportations and basically letting the people go, he's breaking an agreement with several states. And he's also de facto abolishing ICE. Because if they can't deport, ICE can't really arrest somebody. They have no purpose. So the person goes out, rapes somebody, kills somebody, shoots somebody, engages in some form of criminal activity, gets picked up by the local police. They hold him and they say, oh, he's not a citizen. They can't turn him over to ICE because ICE isn't taking people. No deportations. So we now have a criminal that the city, state, and or county will have to pay to house, try, and then at any point through this, possibly have them taken away after the states have spent money. So the judge said, nope, that ain't going to happen. You need to redo this. You need to work out your agreement and abide by your agreement. Biden says that's an agreement that Trump came up with, so he shouldn't have to put up with it. Now, that right there, once again, goes to the hypocrisy of the Democratic Party. The Democrats and the progressives are very good at saying, no, one president's actions can't be held, are not able to restrict the actions of the next one. And in some ways they're right. But if that president has signed an agreement with states, that's an agreement on record, and the states have to abide by it. Now, these same Democrats felt that Trump should abide by the DREAM Act provision that he passed. That was an executive order, which frankly was an unconstitutional executive order, because the president does not have the right to pick what laws he's going to enforce and alter existing law at his choice. The law is the law. And there's a long-standing precedent in this country that says the president can't pick and choose. But when Trump came into office and wanted to stop abiding by the DREAM Act, they said, nope, you can't do that. They even went so far as to take him to court for daring to pass an executive order overthrowing a previous executive order. And the left-wing nut job judge that ruled on that one said, nope, you didn't address any harm this might have caused. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're looking around this country right now and you think that our Constitution means shit, you're delusional. We have laws in this country that are constantly being sidestepped and violated. I'll give you a very good classic example. In the state of Texas, we have an ID law that when a police officer asks you for your ID, you are only required to give it if you are under arrest, you have been lawfully arrested, which means that the officer has more than just a suspicion that you have committed a crime, were committing a crime, or were about to commit a crime. Without being arrested, you are not required to present an identification to a cop. This actually went all the way up to the appellate courts. And the appellate court said no. It's a violation of the Fourth Amendment for you to arrest somebody for not providing ID. You have to have a reason. And just because they're acting suspicious is not reason enough. How did the police deal with this? Did they finally accept that, well, there are limits on our power? No. Now they turn around and they arrest you for obstruction of justice. Now this one's actually funny. By not giving him your ID, you are obstructing their investigation, which means that you no longer have a right to remain silent. You must answer their questions, or they can charge you with obstruction of justice. Now, I'm pretty sure that eventually some court is going to say, no, that's not how it works. But until the court does, you're going to jail. You're going to pay your fine. Laws designed to protect us are being sidestepped. And nothing is more egregious on our rights than the very idea of an executive order. Executive orders have a long history in this country. The very first executive order was supposedly written by none other than George Washington. But the orders back then were internal orders. Orders from the president to a particular part of the executive branch on how to behave, on what to do and how it's supposed to work. It did not alter law. It didn't act as legislation. Because the president is not a legislator. He doesn't pass laws. He can sign a law, but he can't make a law. Over the years, the number of executive orders that have been used to, in a sense, create new law has gone from being the minimum or the exception to being the standard. There is no provision in the Constitution for an executive order, especially one that actually affects the average citizen. The president doesn't have that power in the Constitution. Read it. Our Constitution is supposed to be a constitution of enumerated powers, meaning these are the powers the federal government has, nothing else. Matter of fact, it specifically states that anything not specifically granted to the federal government belongs to the state or the people. So, things that are not covered in the Constitution specifically belong to someone else, or we're supposed to. But as we've seen since the Civil War, even beyond that, let's face it, the Constitution was being broken 3 days after it was being written. They have been finding ways to sidestep it, to get around the restrictions, because that's what governments do. Governments don't want a restriction on their power. Our founders were correct. They knew the government was a necessary evil, that it only did good with the least it was allowed to do. Governments that govern the least govern the best. Now we live in 2021, and the time frame where the federal government has more reach and more power than the founders' worst nightmares. We pay a tax rate so far above what they were upset about that, frankly, I think they would all die of a heart attack if they saw it. With Joe Biden, we're looking at more tax rates coming up, an increase, and in some cases going up to 60% of people's income. That means over half the year you are a slave to the government, and you get to keep 40% of what you earn. Now, I don't know where you come from, but where I come from, that ain't right. So let's look some more at what Sleepy Joe has done. Sleepy Joe in 2 days put out of work somewhere in the vicinity between 5 and, if these measures stay in place, 125, 130,000 people. How? Number one, he canceled the Keystone Pipeline. In doing so, he violated an agreement with Canada, one of our closest partners. After all, they're right across our border. And in doing so he lost between 5 and 10,000 jobs. Congratulations, Joe, you put people out of work during the time of a pandemic and economic hardship. Congratulations. Furthermore, he has gone and put a moratorium on new drilling and any other leases on federal land. One recent study stated that's about 120,000 jobs in the state of Texas alone, that if this moratorium is allowed to continue, will be gone. So congratulations, Joe, you have put out of work at least 100,000 people. Furthermore, you have now finally answered the question, what do you think about fracking? And his answer is he's going to close it down, which means that fracking on any federal land is over. It means all of those poor schmucks up in Pennsylvania that get paid for working on fracking. Congratulations, folks, you voted for him, you get to pay the price. Part of me has no sympathy, other than the fact that this is another blow to our economy. You can't keep destroying the economy. You can't keep whacking at the economy. You can't keep hurting the economy, because eventually it breaks. So let's look at what else he's done. Number one, he did his mask mandate. It is now a requirement in order to be on any federal land, any federal property, that you must wear a mask. Granted, as always, these rules don't apply to him and don't apply to the government and the people in it, because those in power do not write rules for them, they write rules for us. Yes, Joe Biden, who has wrote this mandatory mask rule, was seen and photographed and filmed giving speeches on federal property afterwards without a mask. Now, mind you, the great coronavirus guru, Dr. Fauci, says wear 2 masks, maybe 3, because that'll make you even safer. Now, we have no proof so far that any of these measures that have been taken have in any way, form, or fashion hindered the spread of corona. But Fauci's going to double down and say, wear 2 masks. And even speaking of coronavirus, you can't call it Chinese virus anymore, because that's right, Sleepy Joe says, no, you can't say that. One of the other great moves our great president and fearless leader has done is he's struck a blow for equality. He has made it to where it is nobody can stop anybody from competing in any particular type of sport based on their biological birth. It has to be based on what they claim is their gender. Meaning that if you're a 6'2", 205-pound man, and you want to go and play basketball, and you're not good enough to make it onto the men's team, you might be good enough to make it onto the women's team. All you gotta do is claim to be a woman. A couple years ago, we saw the top-ranking people in women's sports were being slowly overridden by people of a separate gender, meaning guys that claim to be women. Now this has been reinstated, and this policy is going to have women losing in women's sports to transgender women, to men. And I'm not saying that women can't beat men. I'm saying that in some areas, a man has an advantage. It's called science. They can look it up under biology, but the party that's supposed to be all about science kind of loses it when it gets to this area. Anything to support the LGBT community, and in this case, if that means that women lose out in sports, oh well. Women's sports as a protected class has been destroyed. And we're going to start seeing the effect of that very quickly. Granted, the one thing that is keeping this from being immediately felt is the fact that schools are still closed. Now, the CDC and scientists have come out and said, we need to get these schools back open. The kids are not learning. They need the schools. The teachers' unions, on the other hand, said, nope, don't like that idea. And what is the president sided with? The teachers' union. Because it's the science that matters. And I'll tell you, folks, other than his executive orders, the only thing Biden has done is make a few speeches, which no one really believes him. And, of course, he had to have the day off on Sunday because, it's just too tiring for him. He put a lid, no interviews, no conversation, no contact with the press on Sunday. Just like he did throughout his campaign. Anytime he needed to go hide, he would go hide. And the rest of the world had to basically deal with it. It's not like he answers any tough questions anyway. The media has already shown that they're ready to hold this administration to no standard whatsoever. They will talk and praise everything this administration does to the point where there'll be almost no difference between mainstream media in the United States and the media in China and the media in North Korea. Because our leader is a great leader. And as you look at this and you sit back and you realize things are not looking good, well, there's worse things coming. There are proposals in front of Congress to institute measures to stop domestic terrorism. Granted, BLM and Antifa are not domestic terrorists, not according to this administration and not according to any Democrat. These are good guys. They're just out to protest what they think is wrong. So what is a domestic terrorist? A domestic terrorist to them is anybody who doesn't agree with the progressive view. If you are silly enough to go out and protest, you're basically risking going to jail. Whether nothing happens or not, you put your name on it. There are talk about re-education camps. AOC wants to have us deprogrammed. Because after all, anybody that can support Donald Trump obviously has been brainwashed and needs to be fixed. Sad state of affairs when a government that is supposed to be designed to protect freedom of thought is already working out ways to try to get around and do just that, violate people's freedom of speech and freedom of thought. Dark days are ahead of us, folks. And as you're looking at these dark days, you need to ask yourself, are you doing what is necessary to prepare? If you're not, you're going to wake up one day and the government will be at your door, and they're not there to be nice. You start looking around and preparing now, because the darkness is coming. And unlike the soothing darkness that Publius speaks in, this will be the darkness where they hide you from the world and throw you into the deepest and darkest location, and you cease to exist. Now this has been Publius on my countdown to Armageddon, just showing you a little bit of light of what's going on in the world today. I hope you've paid attention. I hope you really start paying attention and stop believing just what's being told on the mainstream media. Find your sources, learn what's happening, and start getting prepared. This has been the Countdown to Armageddon with your host Publius. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's show. Stay tuned for the next show as it comes up. We don't know how often I'll post. I happen to have lost my digital recorder where I usually record with. For some reason it's arguing with me. I have to wait until I can get a new one or get this one fixed. Otherwise I have to use the computer, and that makes things a little more difficult. But I'll be getting you shows as often as I can, and as often as these idiots do things to make it I just can't keep it to myself anymore. So, thank you all for tuning in. Like, subscribe, and share. You have a wonderful night.